real game begins. Riddle me this, riddle me that. Who's afraid of the big black bat?
There was a definite agenda to have a bigger Batman. And my job was to put in everything new that I could.
I guess the mood was a bunch of grown-ups as it's Halloween and we get to do whatever we want because it's a magical world. It's one of those strange, once-in-a-lifetime experiences.
It was such a different feel, from the first two movies. I think that when people saw, they were doing the Riddler and stuff, and it just had a different look to it. And I think people were really excited when it was coming out.
Bob thought that because the second one was perhaps in moments a little too dark, then the third one should be a little more upbeat, not like the television show by any means, but a little bit more lighter, brighter than the second one.
The movie was bigger and more welcoming than we remember, because now we see it in the context of history. But it was a kind of spectacle, and a kind of spectacle that touched for a second what people seem to be hungry for. It was wild summer entertainment.
Joel always wants to push the envelope. He wants it fantastic, to use his own words, exciting and a little extreme. Now, you look at it today, you wouldn't think twice about it. At the time, it was a little on the edge. It was sort of like Saturday Night Fever on acid.
I thought that Batman Forever clearly captured that 1940s, early 50s era of Batman comics. Bill Finger used to write these great stories about Batman fighting villains, jumping from the keys of a giant typewriter that was in display in some World's Fair or wherever, and giant pencil sharpeners. And Batman and Robin were fighting together for the first time. The Riddler made his first appearance in the comics around that time. So everything began to change, and I think that Batman Forever did capture that era of the comic book successfully.
I think that they were looking to re-energize the franchise, to give it a new look, turn it more back to the comic strip, and probably, in a word, more pop. And Joel, of course, was a perfect choice for that. I'm sure this is one of the reasons they wanted Joel, because he wanted to sort of make it a comic book come alive.
I'd never made a comic book before, and it's just great for the imagination because you're not dealing with real life. And once you get into a comic book, you have a much different world, and you get to create a Gotham City. You get to create what all these characters are going to look like. And the studio did want another Batman, and they wanted it to be sort of reinvented. What I said was I'd have to talk to Tim Burton because he's a friend of mine, and I wouldn't do that if Tim wasn't comfortable with it. So I went and had lunch with Tim, and Tim said, no, I'm through. I'm out of there.
Tim was sort of transitioning away from directing and staying on as producer, but handing the reins off to Joel. But we sat down in the room with the both of them, asking, what's your take on Batman? And Jen started talking about how Batman is always about duality, and Tim's eyes just lit up. He said, yes, they get it, they get it.
The transition was absolutely smooth from Tim to Joel. We had a couple of meetings with both of them, and then Joel was taking the reins, and it just seemed like the smoothest possible transition on a franchise of this size.
The Batchers wrote the first draft, and in it, Edward Nygma, who becomes the Riddler, was a scientist. He had a pet rat named Sydney, I remember. It had charming things to it. It was not quite where I thought we were going to ultimately go, but it was a wonderful start, and they were very creative, and they really cracked the ice.
We always figure somebody's going to find a way to make it work. Somebody's going to find a way to put it on screen. And our job is to have the wild enough imagination for it to be worth putting on screen.
I think Joel wanted to make it a little more poppy than Lee and Janet. They were a little more in the tradition, and Joel wanted to stretch it out a little bit, which is, I think, why he ultimately chose Akiva to come in.
What I was trying to do was sort of make it a little bit more of a psychologically real story, try to infuse the characters with a little more pathos and angst, and those things that were slowly but surely getting allowed into comic book movies.
You know, I thought the first movie with Nicholson and Keaton and those guys was amazing. The second one, I didn't like the second one as much. I thought it got really dark. I just didn't enjoy it as much. And Joel coming in, I thought that, you know, this is going to be perfect because I think he'll make it a little bit more colorful and just lighten it up a little bit. These films are all about the visuals, and Joel's a very visual guy.
Tim was more a psychological thriller, and Joel is more a viewing thriller, of excitement to look at.
Joel's style is very presentational and operatic, very sort of beautifully lyrical and larger than life. And that was clearly the style he was taking to Batman.
Go ahead. You can say it. You're a genius.
Practically speaking, the first thing was to find space. To make a movie on this scale, you need an enormous amount of space. I mean, this was Warner Brothers Studios. It's got, 40 stages. There wasn't a stage big enough to build our sets. So that was the very first practical problem of where are we going to build these sets that we can get to and film, based in Los Angeles. The second thing was the cost. It was critical.
When I first started the film, I thought I was going to make it with Michael Keaton. When Michael Keaton fell out, I had just seen Val Kilmer in Tombstone, and I thought he was fantastic in it, and I thought he would be a great Batman.
Michael didn't feel that he wanted to continue. Same thing again, sort of like Tim, that he'd done 2 big Batman movies, and he wanted some change in his life. He dabbled with maybe coming into the picture, maybe not. And so we just sort of gravitated to Val.
It turned out while they were discussing me as the next candidate for the role, I was researching a film about an African adventure. So on the day that Warner Brothers called my agent and said, yeah, he's who we want, I was in a cave full of bats in South Africa.
Bruce Wayne has always been glamorous and attractive and charming on one level, and then dark and tortured, you know, underneath. And I knew Val could play all those sides.
It's not that much fun to be Bruce Wayne. He's kind of in turmoil, you know. I mean, as a character, I was thinking of the character and doing stuff. It was kind of challenging playing the role, to be involved and appropriately involved in the depth of the truth of the character, the myth, and not be so far in it that you're out of the style.
Broken wings mend in time. One day, Robin will fly again. I promise.
I think bringing Robin into the Bat, I don't think at the time when Joel did this, we envisaged that it would become Batman and Robin ultimately, even though from a creative point of view, we knew that, but that wasn't the determination. Joel felt it needed a youthful energy.
Well, I'd never known Batman without Robin. I mean, I grew up on Batman, and there always was Batman and Robin, so it just seemed natural. And we went way back to the early comic books. The circus story and his parents dying that way, that's all from a comic book.
I came to be a part of the movie when I got a call from Joel Schumacher that he was interested in me playing the part of Robin.
I asked Chris to do it right away. I had seen Chris, you know, in all his films, and I thought he'd be a perfect Robin. And Chris was off in Ireland doing Circle of Friends.
I had heard on, you know, TV how they're having these casting calls all over the country and meeting people. I'm like, well, I'm confused because I got a call from my agent saying Joel wants to meet me, he wants me to play the part.
Mally Finn, our casting director, did a nationwide search, and we also looked in London. The day I was in London, they were all teenagers. I met Ewan McGregor, Jude Law, Alan Cumming, Toby Stevens, and a whole bunch more that have all become stars now.
It was pretty wild to be offered the part because I grew up watching the TV show religiously as a kid, and when I was like a Batman fan, it was like, well, I'm gonna be Robin, okay, and it was surreal. It's kind of a double-edged sword. I mean, there's so much exposure that you risk people always remembering you, from that role. But at the same time, that international exposure, it can be so beneficial to your career and getting films made and that sort of thing. So you kind of have to, think for a second before you kind of just jump into it.
This is your brain on the box. This is my brain on the box. Does anybody else feel like a fried egg?
Jim Carrey had his first picture was out, which the Ventura picture, and there was just a buzz about this guy.
I had known Jim ever since he started out as a stand-up comic. I had met him very, very early in both our careers, and he was just starting to emerge as a superstar.
One of the fears that I had going into the project was that, okay, here now is my first huge budget, kind of deal with a lot of people, with a lot of egos, with a lot of everything. And everybody's the best at what they do, and so are they gonna be open to my ideas, And of course, from the first moment we met, Joel and I, it was just, me spewing and him going, that's great! I'm gonna tell everybody I thought of it.
There would be times on the set where, the scene's going okay, and, you could see Joel was kind of hoping we'd do something else, and Jim would just kind of come up with something different. And I know this is the case on half the movies he does, but it was so incredible because, I think it's like a kid in a candy store for him. He's in this ridiculous costume, he's on these enormous sets, and he could just really go to town. And in the same way, I think Nicholson was just so bigger than life in the first Batman. I think Jim Carrey was pretty much the same in ours.
Was that over the top? I can never tell.
It was very hard not to laugh when Jim was working, because he'll try anything, I wish we'd done outtakes.
And it's funny because I think sometimes it kind of rubs some people the wrong way, as if he was maybe stealing the show or something, but I mean, the guy's a genius at what he does.
We had some bad press. I don't know why they did this, but they said that Jim and I weren't getting along, or that I didn't like him or something. I don't know how you can not like him. To be an alien not to like Jim Carrey.
Our kind of day. Yeah.
Joel and I are sitting around, and I said, well, you know what? Tommy Lee Jones could play this role. Harvey Two-Faces be perfect for him. I called Tommy Lee and said, we'd done The Fugitive and Under Siege together. I said to him, how would you like to be in a Batman movie? He said, well, send me the script. So I sent him overnight the script. He said, I don't get it. Why do you want me in this picture?
I'd never heard of Harvey Two-Face, even though I'd read the comic books when I was a child. But my son knew who he was immediately and was very enthusiastic about the movie. In fact, he was enthusiastic about it sooner than I was, which is to say instantly. It took me a little bit longer to talk myself into it, and it was his enthusiasm that was decisive for me, really. Ordinarily, I look for certain subtleties. The comic book doesn't concern itself with. So it was liberating, of course, to be a comic book villain.
It was odd sitting there in the trailer with Tommy Lee Jones and half his face is melted. We're talking about cattle and he's smoking a cigar. Because I've got a ranch and we talk about horses or whatever, and he had a red face. That was weird.
So this is me telling Tommy Lee Jones he's a genius.
Both of us.
But he knows that already, and so does the world now.
Bruce, who is this beautiful young woman you're with?
Dr. Chase Meridian.
A doctor? What kind of doctor?
Joel has this particular ability to, especially in the casting area, to see long-term out. He always wanted Nicole Kidman. It didn't matter. He just felt that Nicole Kidman was a major rising star and loved her elegance and sophistication that she brought to the picture.
Nicole Kidman I had met her after she did Dead Calm when she was about 19. She had just come from Australia and had always wanted to work with her.
I mean, it's great to be a part of, you know, the Batman movies. It's such an American icon. And I wanted to work with Joel. And obviously it was such a great cast with Val Kilmer and Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee and Chris O'Donnell that it was pretty hard to resist.
I'm Bruce Wayne, miss.
Oh, you can call me anything you want.
Well, there's the Riddler,
Oh, good,
Jim
okay.
Carrey,
Yep.
and there's Tommy Two-Face, which is Tommy Lee Jones, and that's sort of I'm Sugar,
Oh, right, yeah,
who's sort of a tribute to Marilyn Monroe. She's very glitter-dipped and decadent, and she's sort of Tommy's girl, along with Spice, because he's sort of two people, and Spice is his darker side. And but then Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee sort of join forces as the big bad guys.
Casting a film is the most important thing on every film. So I think that one of the things you have to be careful of is there may be very big superstar names that want to be in it, but they may not be right. The cast in Batman Forever were not as famous as you think, if you look back in time.
Pre-production is a long period on a Batman, between around 10 months. So the design phase is an extensive phase. I mean, our art department was massive, no question about it. It's one of the most expensive things. Everything in the place is made to order. And so the design and the manufacturing stage is the biggest part of the movie.
You know, it's a much more difficult to build outside the realm of the real world than it is the real world, because it's something nobody's ever done before. They haven't built this before, so it's like, well, we can only try it and see. You know, it's a lot of experimentation, and it's far more fun than any real world. It's, you know, you get to invent.
Every single thing was of such quality, and it shows in the film. It's amazing the craftsmanship on the technical side, and really inspired designers. It's just, you know, it's amazing how every single detail fits.
It's big. I mean, it's like the best of every department coming together on something that they don't have to take incredibly seriously, you know, that they can really be creative and fun with. And that's the exciting part for me.
The pressure doesn't come from the complications in the character. It comes really from the magnitude of the movie. The sets are enormous, and some of the mechanical aspects of those sets, the moving parts, are potentially unwieldy. You know, the challenge that really came from living with and maintaining this enormous scale.
Every day was fun. It was just, it's crazy, but also it's such a spectacle. Every set was amazing. Just when you thought after, I don't know, a month or two in Gotham City, you figure you've seen everything, and then there would be the circus scene or something else, and it was extraordinary.
Lighting is part of the design of the movie. There are flashing and twirling lights. We photograph our own lights in the picture. I mean, it's part of the set. I mean, it's incredible. And you totally buy it. Hundreds and hundreds of shots so you can see the lights that are actually lighting the set.
It was fun to go to work every day. We were creating, you know, our own world. Brilliant, imaginative, creative people around. I try to have a lot of laughs on the set. We certainly had a lot of visitors. Everybody wanted to come and visit.
I really wish that my kids would have been around when we were making it, because my nieces and nephews came to visit the set, and there was something about putting that suit on, and you know, it just made you want to, you know, be a superhero, you know, and you really you kind of bought into it. And when kids would come on the set, it was unbelievable. I mean, they would literally be speechless.
I would sort of try in the first couple of weeks when I was in the bat suit to entertain the kids, when I goof around with the cape, and the kids go into a trance in front of the bat suit. It's amazing to watch, because particularly with the boys, they just get completely entranced by this costume. They don't need any entertainment at all. So after a while, I would just stand there like I was in the Wax Museum.
When a kid meets an actor in a Batman costume, he's met Batman. It isn't an actor that's Batman. And so that's part of the thrill of it, part of the wonder of it. Bob Kane, the man who created Batman.
Boy.
I wouldn't have this job if it wasn't for him.
That's a boy, not a boy.
Bob spent a great deal of time on the set, and he had his chair with his name on it sitting right next to Joel. So they had a very nice relationship. That was good to see.
I would say he came once a week, which was great, and he was a lot of fun. He had a great sense of humor.
I think I'll be your publicist, Joel.
Oh, this is great. Did you sign it for me?
Well, of course I signed it. Do you know how to read?
I love talking to Bob Kane. He said that he liked what I did a lot. It was nice whenever he said it. He said it a lot, so it's easy to go to work, but my head would swell inside the batsuit.
We went to a comic convention in San Diego, I think it was, with him. We said, "Well, you want to come?" He said, "Sure." It was like walking around with a god.
Victory is inevitable. For if knowledge is power, then a god am.
Long ago, when this whole thing started, Batman Year One, the Frank Miller comic, was always my favorite. And I was always hoping that I would do that one. There was no desire to do that the first time around, and there was definitely no desire to do that the second time around.
Batman Forever and Batman and Robin often now get squidged together, but Batman Forever is darker than Batman and Robin. It is a retelling of the origin story in a way that attempts to take a little bit closer look at the psychology of young Bruce Wayne and how he became older Bruce Wayne. There's a piece of the movie that isn't in the final cut, but which is strangely the narrative component that the story was built around. All the way throughout the movie, there are these images, there are these recurring images of this book, this mysterious book. And in the movie, when the book is revealed to be Bruce's father's diary, it simply says,
"He'd written in it every day of my life, but now he'd never write in it again. At that moment, I knew my life would never be the same."
In the screenplay and in the movie that we shot, there is a very different center of the movie where he opens up the book and the last entry is, "Martha and I want to stay home tonight, but Bruce insists on going to see a movie." And so the idea was that somewhere Bruce remembered and had repressed his fantasy that this was all his fault. That if he just hadn't made them go see a movie that night, they would never have been out and they would never have been killed. And so the whole movie was actually built around this kind of psychological reckoning, which is why the love interest is a psychologist, and why, in fact, there was a whole section of the movie, which was actually in the commercials and the previews, where Bruce then returns to the cave that he fell in, running away when he was holding that book, and sees that giant bat. Val sort of spread his arms, and the bat spread his arms, a very sort of gothic component of the movie, quite dark. It was a much more complex, really kind of fun, but much darker version of the movie.
Now that's impressive!
The post-production process is extremely pressured. In fact, from the last day of photography to completion of the answer print with all the visual effects in there is 10 weeks, which is, in today's world, is lightning time.
There wasn't an enormous expectation on anyone's part because we had gone into it with being told constantly that no one wanted another Batman movie. That was sort of that's what we'd all been told by so many people by then, that if they were banking on it being their biggest movie of the year, they certainly didn't say that.
We had around 200 sponsors, from the hamburger company all the way to toothpaste. I mean, it's just extraordinary. It is a large part of the Batman franchise. It assists us in getting the picture into the public's eye and maintaining it there.
It was amazing. I remember when the first movie came out, for our first movie, Batman Forever, they had these posters. They had one for each character, and they put them all at the bus stops around LA, and people were literally ripping these things open to get the posters.
I did know when we were in a small town in Mississippi, I passed a McDonald's, and they were giving away Batman stuff. And I went in to look at it, and it was all gone. And this was about 2 weeks before the movie opened.
McDonald's had these cups that were made in France, and their entire order was gone in 2 days. 2 days.
I did get a sense then, being deep in the heart of Mississippi, that if the Batman merchandise was all out already at McDonald's, that there was an awareness, that there was a big awareness of an anticipation of the film.
When we got our grosses back, I think it was $15 million for Friday night. Nobody had ever heard of anything like that. Today, yeah, it was 23 on Friday, but I mean, dear God, that was so much. We all thought it was a typo.
I remember being in Australia on the press junket for Batman the day it opened, and I remember getting a call from Bob Daly and saying that it was going to be the biggest opening weekend of all time. And I know there are some movies that think they're going to do that, but we didn't. It was a real surprise. And then any of those toy franchises and merchandisers and people who had come in with us against their better judgment really got rewarded because they were in there when the movie hit and they had the merchandise to back it up.
There are very few films that reach that many people. I don't think any, none that I can think of, that don't have a really compelling story. There's something fundamentally attractive about the story, and we all want to know who we are, and we all have nightmares that could turn into something that's healing, or we have nightmares that are reoccurring, like Bruce Wayne, that need to get healed, and it's really well made story.
Everybody was generally very happy to have a new style of the franchise. We delivered what we agreed to deliver.
The success of a movie doesn't really happen to you. You just sort of someone tells you about it, or you are aware of it. Your whole experience with the film is really finished when you hand it in. It's like raising someone else's child. You have to give it back after a while. The truth is, it's your movie while you're making it, but it really belongs to the movie studio, and ultimately it belongs to the public, because that's who you really made it for. It was a great experience, and a really unexpected success. I mean, I thought some people would go to see a Batman movie, but I didn't know we would have the success we did.
I love that. I love, being open and susceptible to just interactions with people on a daily basis. It's wonderful,
There was a kind of modesty when we made Batman Forever, which was a little bit like we think we can. And it just felt on Batman and Robin that Jack was out of the box. It just felt like the sky was the limit.
We were on a high, there's no question about it. You have a film that's very successful, Batman Forever, and you have all the elements in place. You say, why not? We had a great time, let's do it again.
Hi, Freeze. I'm Batman.
First movie, things felt much sharper and more focused. And it just felt like everything got a little softer on the second one. The first one, I felt like I was making a movie. The second one, I felt like I was making a toy commercial.
Batman Forever kind of crept up on people. Batman and Robin was so overhyped from the minute we said we were going to do it that I think that backfires many times. When you're supposed to be a blockbuster, then you have to be.
Hey, Sketch! You break it, you buy it.
Grab the gem! Kill the heroes!
We were just getting ready to shoot A Time to Kill, and Bob Daly and Terry Selmo called me and asked me if I would do another Batman. And it did seem like the audience and the media and the studio, everybody wanted me to do another one. Now, of course, everyone wanted to be involved. So it was the opposite from Batman Forever when we had to go around and convince everybody to come along with us. We were going to make a Batman movie. This was, how can we stop everybody? It was everybody and their mother wanted to have their franchise in the movie and be part of it, and it was a very, very different experience.
It was evolving. I don't think we were publicly saying, okay, we're making another one. We're going straight into the next one. As it turned out, we did pretty much go into the fourth one the second one for us, almost without a break.
By the time you filmed these movies and got all the press once they came out, you know, to start one up as soon as we did was really soon, I thought. And I think that, you know, ultimately the movie suffered because I think, number one, I don't think people were ready for it. There's something about these things being away for a certain amount of time where people's interest kind of starts to percolate a little bit. I think people were still sick of seeing all the press and all the coverage and all. I mean, it's an assault when these things come out.
In Batman and Robin, there was a real desire at the studio to keep it more family-friendly, more kid-friendly. And a word I had never heard before, more toyetic, which means that what you create makes toys that can sell.
We involved the toy company. We let them look and be involved in how the Batmobile was going to look, how Batman's gadgets were going to be, which they wanted. This is key to them. They need a lot of lead time.
We started planning in August of '95. I knew I wanted to do Mr. Freeze and Poison Ivy as the villains, and so we started with tear sheets, comic books, and discussions of what they would look like and how we were going to make Gotham City bigger, better, and what areas we were going to be going into. So all of those things as you're designing, they're ripping them out of your hands because they're going to make the molds. The molds for them usually have to be made in Asia. So you have to give them the designs far in advance so they can get these molds made to make the toys made, so the toys will be out when the movie's coming out. So everything that we did was, can you make it bigger, can you make it better? And I'm not criticizing anyone. I signed on to do this. I was doing this job, but that was a major part of the job.
Can't believe we were fighting over a bad guy.
Bad, yes. Guy, no.
Well, I'm totally over, all right? Positively.
Me too, definitely. Great stems, though.
Buds, too.
Yeah, those are nice.
Oh, the cast was the greatest in the world. I mean, to go to work every day with George Clooney and Chris O'Donnell and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Uma Thurman is just, you know, it doesn't get any better.
Well, I agreed to do another film, The Saint, and they never called the agents and they never called me and told me they were going to go right into production inside of a year.
I was angry at Val and his representatives at the time because they let us know at the last second. That's what I was angry at. I wasn't angry that Val wasn't doing the movie. I was angry that we found out at the 11th hour.
It's still puzzling when I think back. It's almost 10 years already, and I look back and I think, why would they do that? But, you know, it's a business, and those things end up happening.
I met with George Clooney, who was just great. He's just one of the greatest guys in the world. I thought he'd be a charming, handsome Batman.
There's a minute there that you go, well, do I want to be the third Batman in the fourth Batman picture? That can be a little worrisome because the other three were very successful, and the only thing you can do is screw it up. That's really the only result, you know? So I didn't think that there were that many things to gain career-wise by doing it, but on the other hand, I get a chance to be in this huge event movie.
I think Joel wanted him not to be too serious in the Bat role, which is the way I think that he played it and felt comfortable playing it. There's a little more humor and fun in his than the previous Batman.
The thing is, you got to remember, Michael started this and he made it his own. You know, Batman was Batman, and Michael will always be Batman because of that. And then Val came in and did something completely different. And he was a darker, very strong, very brooding character. So for me, there weren't many options. In the fourth Batman, and we talked about this because there were some pages originally written that had him, you know, dealing with his parents being dead again. And I said, you know, he's a 35-year-old guy who lives in a giant mansion and has billions of dollars and goes out with the most beautiful women in the world and has the coolest toys and is Batman. And I don't think anybody is going to feel sorry for and listen to a guy going, woe is me, my parents died when I was 4. So the only thing we tried to do was give him a little less weight to carry on his shoulders.
Because we were supposed to make a more family-friendly movie, I would make a gentler, kinder, kind of, maybe not as depressed, not as tortured Batman. I know I've been criticized a lot for this, but I didn't see the harm in it.
The Batman thing I wasn't ever wholly comfortable with because it's very tough to be comfortable as Batman. You kind of have to cop a different kind of attitude. You have to cop this extremely confident, invulnerable kind of man, much easier to catch Bruce Wayne.
We had to shoot around his schedule because he was shooting ER at the time. So we shot Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. We would try not to schedule him on Friday, so he'd get 3 days in a row. He'd get Wednesday, Thursday, Friday on ER. I mean, the guy is amazing. He worked 7 days a week for months, I mean, actually, as it turned out.
I want a car. Chicks dig the car.
This is why Superman works alone.
It was fun to go back and do it again, and with different people. You know, I was kind of bummed out at the timing, because I just had things going on, other things that I wanted to do. But at the same time, you know, I had a great experience doing these Batman movies, and I got to travel all over the world doing publicity. I mean, publicity can be a miserable thing, but you know, if you look at it just as a great experience to go around the world and from a business standpoint, get a lot of exposure, I really enjoyed it. You know, even though looking back, I felt like we kind of rushed getting that second one done. You know, I still would have done it, if I had the chance over.
I'm a director that is very cast dependent. I only have usually one choice for each role. And until I'm really turned down, I don't fall in love with anyone else. And so I've been very lucky to get my first choices on most of my movies. Arnold seemed a perfect fit, you know, this big Austrian, you know, scary guy in the metal suit.
Allow me to break the ice. My name is Freeze. Learn it well, for it's the chilling sound of your doom.
George Schumacher was the motivating force for me to do Batman. Although I have seen all the other Batmans and I have enjoyed them thoroughly, and was always interested in, of course, playing the ultimate villain in one of those movies. I didn't really think much about it until George Schumacher came to me and said that he would like me to play Mr. Freeze. But as I said to him, I said, you know, this sounds very interesting, and let me think about it. This is really a great character to play. And Joel then turned to me and said, well, just so you know, that if you decide not to do it, I will not direct the movie, because I only can do this movie if you play Mr. Freeze. So, what are you gonna do? I mean, screw up a whole movie? He made me feel like I would make this whole thing fall apart if I'm not part of this whole. So he made me feel like, you know, King Kong. So I said to him, I called him the next day and I said, you know something, Joe, I'm going to do Mr. Freeze.
Breezy, I'm feeling hot.
Batman and Robin. Glitter came out of my skin for 2 weeks. That's all I'm gonna say. I don't think I've ever had so much damn glitter on me in my life.
What was it like to work with George Clooney, though?
He was fine. Oh, Lord, George Clooney, my goodness. He was very nice, but good-looking man. Like, you know why he's a movie star.
Hi there.
And you are?
Poison. Poison Ivy.
I'd been a huge fan of Uma Thurman's since the seashell opened in Baron Munchausen, and she was Venus. And the minute it was printed that we were going to have a villainess named Poison Ivy, the one-liner that went under it was the most beautiful woman in the world, but if you kiss her, you die. Well, the most beautiful woman in the world are fighting words in Hollywood. Everybody saw themselves as the most beautiful woman in the world. It's my Gotham City, and I think that Uma Thurman is one of the most beautiful women in the world. And besides great beauty, I needed a great actress also with a sense of humor.
Well, I figured because, you know, there are not many female villains to introduce. And I didn't know that it would be something as delectable as a villainous part. I just sort of guessed, and I asked Joel straight out when we had lunch. I said, you know, well, look, if it's here for a damsel in distress, you know, let's just part ways. But if it's a villain, I'd really like to talk about it. And he was like, well, it is a villain. Her name is Poison Ivy.
Uma had a lot of great ideas about what she should be like, this kind of warped woman. She was there for a long time, and I got her right at the beginning, so I think I got the best of her even. And we kept having to do that kiss over and over again. That was so hard, you know?
To be a Batman villain is like, in the movies, in a comic pop kind of way, it's sort of like an opera part. You know, it's limitless. Someone said to me, you can't be too big and you can't be too small. But there is just, the opportunities are endless with the characters, and so it was just tempting. I've never done anything like it, and it doesn't come by very often.
I think because a lot of critics bash the movie, I think they overlooked Uma's performance, which I think is great.
And you are?
Batgirl.
That's not awfully PC. What about bad person or bad woman?
Bruce, it's me, Barbara.
I thought that in this mode of making a more family-friendly, more kid-friendly movie, to give maybe little girls more of an access into Batman. I realized that there weren't really any superheroines, especially teenage ones in our culture, which is sort of unusual. I don't know what that says about us, but there was no one better than Alicia Silverstone to be Batgirl.
I actually had no idea that there was a Batgirl. I watched the series and I was really into the Catwoman character and really into the Joker and the Riddler, but I didn't know of Batgirl at all.
1, 2, 3, action!
Using feminine wiles to get what you want. Yeah! Oh! Curses!
I think we want to be served up something with a lot of psychological complexity and darkness when we do these movies. I mean, I think that there's a certain component of the fan base who will literally think I am the personification of the other, but in fact, the truth is, what I believe these movies need are as much darkness and complexity as they can have. Sometimes you get some going, sometimes you don't.
Joel knew where he wanted to go with the picture, and Joel likes it very bubbly. He doesn't like it too serious. Let's not take ourselves too seriously here. We're making a Batman movie. We're making a comic book, a live comic book.
Batman, Robin. Before a take, Joel would pick up his megaphone, his bullhorn, and go, "Remember, everybody, it's a cartoon." So that kind of set the tone and the style of Joel's Batman.
The whole approach was much more glossy and theatrical. It was all a totally different look to Tim's film, which was all dark and shadows. But I could also understand, as you progress through 1, 2, 3, 4 films, that maybe you have to change the look, otherwise the audience think, "Oh, I've seen this," you know, so.
There's no way I can explain it to you other than I had no idea that putting nipples on the Bat costume were going to be international headlines. The bodies for the suits the inspiration for them are Greek statues that have perfect bodies. And so we're molding this perfect body in rubber, and they're anatomically erotic. And so it never occurred to me not to put nipples on the men's suits because I didn't know that the male nipple was a controversial body part. Then I was left with the dilemma of what to do with Batgirl. Because if we didn't give her nipples, then we would have seemed sexist, I think, to have left her out. So hers are a little subtler.
You know, it wasn't so much the nipples for me as it was the codpiece. You know, the press obviously kind of, you know, with Joel directing, of course, they kind of played that up a little bit, but I didn't think twice about it. Although now I kind of look back at some of the pictures and I'm like, that is a little unusual, I suppose.
Val Kilmer and Chris O'Donnell's codpieces were exactly the same size. Chris's is shorter, so it looked bigger. The joke was on the set that Chris had tipped Jose, the great sculptor, to make his bigger. All right. So then George came into the picture, and George asked me in the early press conferences to please tell everyone that Val's suit fit him perfectly, but we had to make the codpiece larger to accommodate him.
I asked for a bigger package. Apparently Chris was tipping the costumer, but I did get a nice ass.
Even though the job has enormous pressures and responsibilities, you're making a Batman comic. And, you know, in comic books, they draw very beautiful, anatomically perfect people in very alluring costumes, and we owe that to the audience. But I will take responsibility for casting and glorifying beauty and sexuality in this. That's part of the fun of a Batman comic book.
1, 2, 3, action!
There is a serious nature to this that when it's time to rock, it's time to rock.
The main unit really had to concentrate on the money, the actors. I guess why I quite enjoyed doing second units now, not first units, because you have the fun stuff. It's tough, but you have the fun stuff. Museum was tough because originally we had the whole museum frozen so they could do it on ice skates. The whole, I mean, it's a huge set at Warner's was an ice rink with a set built on it. And then about 3 days before that, they decided they would do it on rollerblades. So we got these extreme skaters in there who are actually fantastic.
Let's turn cameras.
Okay, roll cameras. We're rolling. We're rolling cameras, rolling. Okay, action, Rick.
I always kind of, when I'd see the movie, I'd laugh and think, I don't really remember doing that scene. And I'm like, that's not me. I mean, there were literally 3 crews at all time. And in fact, I'm in a lot of scenes with Mr. Freeze. I never worked a single day with Arnold. Not a single day. I was on the set with him a lot. You know, I'd hang out and talk to him. I did a lot of publicity with him. But literally, they had a double for him that was so good, and that suit was so complicated and involved to get on, that unless Arnold was talking in a scene, he wasn't in that costume. It was a movie where there were a lot of doubles.
They never wanted Batman to be seen as not an icon. In other words, they didn't want George or Val to be standing there with the cowl just talking, having a Diet Coke on the set. There was either, George Clooney or Bruce Wayne or Batman.
Whenever we're making a Batman type of movie, everybody is very, very careful about not letting too much get out of the box and making it public until we're sure where we're going. Security on things like the script is very high. Security on the set's very high.
George and I, when they had like these silver suits that we were in, they were so nervous about people seeing them and people stealing things. They had people walking with giant poster boards as we came out of our trailers going into the set, covering us.
The studio security and I decided that we would put up a metal detector. And we had a very large crowd that day, somewhere around 200, 250 people. They go to a specific stage where the wardrobe is going to be, but the first thing they got to do is, as they get off the bus, is go through a metal detector. I think we got 500 cameras from 200 people. They had cameras stuffed everywhere, and it was just a nightmare. Security aspects of making a movie like this is a nightmare.
One of the Batman heads turned up missing. I mean, suddenly every single car that left that lot, they were searching trunks, everything, every car for weeks. People were so mad that they were filming Batman on the set because they were so sick of having their cars searched. And then they caught a guy on the set one day that, had a hidden video camera, and it was like a sting operation. I mean, it was unbelievable. But it kind of all added to the mystique of the movie and the production. Oh, you can't believe what's going on. And I mean, it was entertaining just being on the set.
There were days when there were 150 visitors during the day, and people would bring their kids. People would come to see the sets. It sort of became a thing to do.
Major people would want to come visit the set, either because they had kids or whatever. But every day you'd kind of, come back from lunch or go to the makeup trailer and be like, "Oh, did you see who was here?" And you're like, every day, just these crazy stars. What were they doing here? Oh, they just wanted to see the sets. So it was like a zoo. I swear, it was literally like a zoo.
Tonight, hell breathes over.
The movies, to me, have always reflected a different era from the Batman mythology. To me, Tim Burton's first film was truly the Batman of 1939 before Robin came in. Batman Returns was more of Tim's tribute to the Batman comics, the way they were portraying the character in the 1990s. Batman Forever, pure middle of the 1940s to the middle of the 1950s. And Batman and Robin clearly was all about the Batman of the 60s in the comic books. So I think that a fan's perspective or an audience's perspective on these movies is different depending on what age group they are in and what type of Batman comics they grew up reading.
I think the reaction to fans, generally, especially the more avid fans, is they were hoping that we would have gone a little darker than Batman Forever. we didn't do that. We went the way it is. It had been some years between the second one and the first one we did, the one with Val. And I think probably the studio would like to maybe have had another year. I don't think we would have made it any better, but I think they would have, just in terms of the audience, the core base, I think they would probably like to have had another year between.
The merchandising and licensing became a very, very important part of the making of the film. But I also have to say, I was an adult, I was awake, and I went along with it. So I'm not pointing a finger at anyone else and saying, they made me do this, all right? I was there.
I think what the conclusion was is probably the same place Tim Burton was after two of them. It is an extensive part of your life. I mean, it's 4 years out of probably a 40, 45-year life, a work life. So you just spent 10% of your entire work life on 2 productions.
The studio wanted me to do a 5th Batman, which would have been my 3rd, which would have featured the Scarecrow. And I just couldn't do it. It wasn't really in me anymore. It has to be a true passion. It can't be a job. And it can't be because people expect you to do it. If there's anybody watching this that, let's say, loved Batman Forever and went into Batman and Robin with great anticipation, if I disappointed them in any way, then I really want to apologize, because it wasn't my intention. My intention was just to entertain them.
You know, I felt very much, and still do, that we were doing exactly what you're supposed to do. I leave the opinion of quality to the individual viewer, but what you're supposed to do with icons is contort them. I mean, the reason that comic books survive over time is that the characters are durable, and they are afforded different realizations. They're different lenses through which to see the world. They change and are changed by the world, by the time, by the historical moment that they're in. And without those aborted and perhaps less successful bends and twists, you never get Dark Knight Returns. You will never, ever find a Clint Eastwood version of Batman. And those are the things we want. And that's what we yearn for. We yearn for something old made new spectacularly. And so, you know, that's the job. The job is standing on its head and see if it stands up or falls down.
I remember years ago, Jerry Weintraub introduced me to Colonel Tom Parker, who, you know, discovered and managed Elvis. And he told me that Elvis was such an icon that after Elvis died, he could just send the suit around the United States and make a fortune on the suit. Batman is like Elvis. It's really the suit that is the star, which is not to take away from Michael Keaton or Adam West or George Clooney or Val Kilmer, but it's Batman who's the star. And Batman's gonna go on long after us. I'm not worried about Batman.
There used to be a graying tower alone on the sea. You became the light on the dark side.
It wasn't right to put on the first album, so I saved it for the second one. And it just so happened that Joel heard it, and he liked it. Now, knowing the script for the movie and seeing snippets of it, I can understand why he liked it, why he wanted it for the movie. If one didn't know, one would think I actually wrote it for the movie.
And now that your rose is in bloom, a light hits the gloom.